Welcome to the Red Button Adventures in Security Leadership, which was the very snappy title that I came up with when I had to submit the CFP. So hopefully this will match up. So my name is Molly Crowther. I'm a staff technical program manager and a manager at Pivotal in our research and development group working on Pivotal Platform. You may know me from such activities as Cloud Foundry vulnerability management. I used to work on customer security assessments. So when we had customers who ran kind of internal assessments on the platform and would come back to us with requirements, I would help them through that. I also was on the security leadership team at Pivotal and have worked on security education. But in my day job as a program manager, our team kind of acts as personal trainers to help the organization learn how to get better at delivering software. So hopefully the big red button that I'm going to be talking about is more like an easy button and less like a panic button. And we're going to talk about what that actually means. So the red button that I'm referring to is really, it comes from the Toyota production system. And it was originally the idea of an andon cord, which is this little thing right here. It's a cord that anyone on the line creating a car can pull that basically says, I need help, there's something wrong. And if it can't get fixed within a certain amount of time, the line actually stops. So everyone who's working on this car has not only the ability, but the obligation to pull the cord if something's going wrong. And an andon is actually a type of Japanese lantern that doesn't actually look anything like this, but it's like referring to the lights that light up when you actually pull the cord. So they need to stop the problem because they don't want these defects getting to customers, and then the line can kind of restart once the problem's been solved. And this sounds like a really simple idea, right? Like anyone has this ability to stop the line and fix the problems. But they actually kind of carefully designed a bunch of steps that will actually increase the psychological safety kind of the environment that allows someone to actually make this decision. Because if you kind of have workers that are scared to use this system or scared to call people out, then they're not going to use it, and you're going to end up with cars coming off the line with defects. I think there's actually a quote that's saying, like, if no one pulls the cord during their shift, either like you have a really good production line or a really bad one. So you're not getting that signal if nobody's pulling the cord. And just as a quick refresher, what actually is psychological safety? The dog is confused about what's going on. It's the safety that you need to be able to take risks within your team, interpersonal risks between people, being able to kind of put your ideas out there and not feel like you're going to be made fun of, or like people are going to tell you your ideas are stupid or that you're doing the wrong thing. And when Google studied this a couple years ago, there's a really famous study that basically said that at Google, psychological safety was the most important factor for determining whether or not your team was going to be effective. And that was more important than the seniority of the members of the team, whether they were co-located, things like that. So it's really important for highly effective teams. This is a really interesting, also coming out of Google, just like some steps that you can use to actually increase psychological safety on your team. I don't think trust falls always are going to work, but maybe if you have a cute dog, they'll work. The ways you actually do this are by demonstrating engagement. So when somebody comes to you with an idea, you actually take them seriously and listen to them. You want to show understanding when someone comes to you with an idea. So being able to reflect back at someone what they've just said to you is really important. You want to be inclusive in interpersonal settings, and that means basically allowing yourself to be vulnerable and also expressing gratitude when people bring feedback to you or bring their ideas to you. Being inclusive in decision making, so making sure that everyone on the team is included in actually making a decision. And then if you're a leader on the team, it's really important to show confidence in the decisions you're making, but not be inflexible. So that if a teammate is saying, this is going to make my life a lot worse, you can't be inflexible about the decisions. So actually what happens when somebody pulls the and-on cord isn't just the line stops and they fix the problem, they move on. There's a couple things here that they do specifically to increase psychological safety. The first of which is the manager actually gets up from their office or wherever they are and they physically go to where the problem is. And that's kind of why you get those lights lighting up so they know where they have to go. And they found that was more effective than like the manager sitting in their office and picking up a phone and, calling and being like, what's wrong? Like they actually have to physically go, they can physically see the problem and help the worker figure out what to do. When they show up, they actually thank the person who pulled the cord. There was this quote that it seems very Japanese to me that they basically show up, they say like, I am the CEO, thank you for pulling this cord, like you're preventing customer defects from happening. So they kind of go out of their way to make sure that the person sees that gratitude that they pulled the cord. And then they talk to them in a way to specifically understand what the problem is. And it comes from the mindset of how can I help you solve the problem? It's not, what did you do wrong? Like, what's going on? It's literally like, you found something. How can I as a manager help you? And then the line can start again when the problem is resolved. And they hope that the problem is actually fixed by the team. So the team is coming up with the idea of how do we resolve this defect? It shouldn't be coming from the manager in the best case. So this actually fits with what Google was saying about how to increase psychological safety. They're demonstrating engagement by showing up and actually engaging with the person who found the problem. They're being inclusive by thanking the person for bringing it. They're showing understanding by actually reflecting back, this is what I hear you saying, this sounds like what you want to do. And they can start the line again, and that's showing that the person is included in deciding to start the line or stop the line. And it's a pretty cut and dry decision, we're going to start the line again and production begins again. So it's kind of cool that the stuff that was started by Toyota a really long time ago also totally fits in to what Google and other kind of high-performing teams are doing now in the software industry. Another cool example of this, at least in the pivotal context, is Concours. Concours is basically an and-on system. You can see in the picture right here, this is the San Francisco office. Most pivotal offices have these TV monitors up all over the office. Basically, each team gets one. And they usually put some mixture of Concours pipelines and puppy videos running, sometimes cats at any given time. And you can kind of see here, there's actually, you can visually see whether the tests are running green or red, which is really cool because it's this automated system that stops the line whenever a test fails. And that's basically how we do our automated testing. So everyone around the office can see whether a build is green or red. The testing stops when it goes red. The team basically has to fix it before they can start again. And it really normalizes failure. I think in kind of the early days of Pivotal, in the early days of kind of Concours and our experience with automated CI systems, people didn't necessarily want the televisions up there because they were afraid their bosses were going to walk around and see that the tests were red. But now it's just a completely normal thing because everyone is doing it. It's not a problem when your tests go red. It's just something you have to figure out how to fix. Just as an aside, I thought this was really interesting. Toyota, because of their value of continuous improvement, they actually started getting rid of the actual and-on cords back in 2014, and they replaced them with these big wireless yellow buttons that they can move around, so they don't actually have to have all the physical infrastructure of the cords. They also wanted to reduce kind of the overhead clutter that was in the workspaces. And it's actually safer because they have all these like moving parts around that could possibly get caught on the cords. And then there was no like electrical cords on the ground to trip on either. So I just thought that was really cool. So how does this actually relate to security? I started working on security at Pivotal in 2016, and we kind of had a similar problem, was that we knew that there were issues being introduced in CF. Cloud Foundry has always been like a really fast-moving product, and kind of the people at the director and VP level were starting to get scared that they like didn't actually know what the security problems were that we had, and they weren't sure that they would know how to find out if people found things. There was kind of a mix of different email lists, people you might go to on Slack. We had a head of security, but like, why would you go to that person who's like at a, almost the C level if you have a problem? Like, that doesn't seem like the right thing to do. So we needed the people closest to the actual information of what was getting built to tell us what was wrong, similar to the people being on the line. We needed to help everyone kind of understand that we wanted to create this psychologically safe security environment so that they could report things and that they wouldn't get in trouble. So we kind of made our own and-on cord. I don't think we thought of it as that at the time, but we knew that we needed to start kind of ingesting this information if we were going to understand the actual kind of security landscape that we were in. I was looking into this today, and it went back far enough that I couldn't actually like place all of the pieces on a timeline. Basically the first thing that we did was we just set up a security@pivotal.io email address. We knew that that was going to be a decent way to be able to get reports about security. It's a common thing that companies do. We could have people like encrypt their emails if they wanted, and we could get them from inside and outside the company, which was really important. We started getting those first emails in March 2016, which was like the first month that I joined. I was looking in Slack for mentions of like, you should email security at. So we were at least publicizing it by June 2016. And then by October, it had actually grown enough that we needed to have a ticketing system and not just have a bunch of directors on an email list. And then we formed a security triage team in December 2016, which was me and Rash and Anthony. So we were, I'll send some thanks to them later, but we were distributed. Rash was in Virginia, I think, and Anthony was in New York, and I was in San Francisco. So we, gave ourselves stand-ups at random times, and it was very interesting having like a 3-person distributed team trying to triage all of the security concerns for Pivotal. By 2017, we were a top 40 vendor on cvedetails.com. It's a website that kind of aggregates information about security vulnerabilities. So by 2017, we had fixed and published enough security vulnerabilities publicly that we were already like on a website with vendors like Apple and Microsoft and Adobe and things like that, which I thought was really cool. And then the team still exists. We have the PM in the room today. So they're still going strong after having changed PMs like 3 times and having had like a whole bunch of engineers rotate through the program. And they even made their own logo that has a dog on it. And I was not involved whatsoever in that decision. So just to give you an idea of the flow that we actually have, this is a very simplified version. Someone emailing security at is really the equivalent of pulling the and-on cord. There's actually an automated thank you that they get that's just like, hey, we received your email, thanks a lot. Like, we take every security concern seriously, and we promise we'll get back to you. The triage team takes a look. It might be irrelevant. The email address actually gets a fair amount of spam. Sometimes people are reporting things that like we already know or already have decided like aren't something that's going to be fixed. So they'll respond and close the ticket if necessary. But if it seems like a new thing, they actually start a Slack channel and go and talk to the team. And that's pretty similar to like the manager coming down on the line to actually talk to the person who reported the issue. And that's basically if it's an internal team, which is actually where we get most of our reports from. If it's outside the company, obviously we probably won't start a Slack channel with the reporter, but we'll still start it with the team. And then similar to what Toyota does, the team helps security triage understand the severity of the issue, and then the team will fix the issue. This isn't like a security team that kind of tells you to get off the computer and we'll fix the problem and then you can go back to your work. The team is completely involved in fixing it. And then we'll actually make, in most cases, we will get a CVE number from MITRE that runs the national database. So the vulnerability can be classified and customers can be notified, and we'll make a public statement and then close out the issue. So in hindsight, I didn't really know that we were basically doing the same thing that Toyota did. But if you think about it, it's basically the same thing. The emailing the team can interrupt the flow of basically the software that's on the production line. That thank you goes to the reporter to make sure they understand that we're taking them seriously. We work with the team to understand the issue. Teams fix the issue, and then we make it public. And then they can go back to work that they probably care about more, unfortunately. So we learned a lot of things, and I have a couple of interesting stories. I think one of the first things we learned was that psychological safety, especially when you're talking about security, doesn't happen on its own. Like, it's something you have to really intentionally cultivate. Certain people had a lot of baggage from previous jobs and previous interactions working with security teams. There were multiple times when people asked me, will I be fired if I report this? And those were usually people who hadn't been at Pivotal very long. And it was like, what are you talking about? Of course you're not. Like, if you're so scared, I will report it on your behalf, and everything's gonna be fine. There were a couple of times when the security triage team kind of showed up at a pair's desk or like came to interrupt the interrupt pair, and they're like, who are you? What are you doing? Why are you bothering me about the security issue? I don't understand. Do I have to work over the weekend? Like, I think that happened a lot. So we had to realize that like, just because we're pivots doesn't mean we're not scary. And we had to make sure people felt comfortable talking to us. There were multiple times when people would reach out to me before sending something to security app because they didn't know what kind of the consequences to the teams would be. When we first started this, we didn't have a really good conception of kind of how severely should we shut the line down and for how long. So back in the early days, we were kind of calling a lot of high severity incidents. There were several times when we made like the release engineering team stay to cut a release at like midnight on a Friday. It wasn't great. Like we definitely made the understanding that like for every hour you stay late, you need to take 2 hours off either the next day or sometime during the week, which I think helped. But people just didn't want to like create inconvenience for their coworkers. So once we figured out that it like wasn't actually helping our customers to release things like on a Friday night or a Saturday, it wasn't making them any safer. We basically stopped doing that, so people were a little bit less afraid of reporting things. Yeah, and that kind of speaks to the overreaction thing. There were several times where we kind of released an open source build of Cloud Foundry on a Saturday, and people were like, our SLAs say that we have to patch this in 10 hours. Can you please tell me like why I'm doing this and what this is? And like, can you just stop doing this? And I think the security team was like, but we're making you safer. Like, we just gave you fixed code. And they're like, I didn't want it. Please wait till Monday. Like, it's not necessary. So we definitely did a couple of iterations. This is representing like San Francisco getting up after New York has been awake for a couple hours already. So that was one of the things we experimented was the team time zones. We had a distributed team working on this in San Francisco and New York for probably over a year, and we ended up kind of dropping the New York team and moving everything to San Francisco because just the time zones were way too hard. But going back, like I think we had some initial success because we had a lot of engagement from leadership. Ansi specifically was making security a really big part of his like all hands presentations at the time. So anyone doing a similar thing, I would definitely recommend getting as many people involved from like high up leadership as possible to help people feel safe. Like if your vice president is saying like you should feel free to email this address anytime you have a problem, it's going to help people. We definitely started with the MVP of just like we're going to have this email address that people can send things to, and then once it got big enough, we added a ticketing system. And once it got big enough from there, we added a team and added a bigger team. So definitely if you are thinking about doing something similar, you don't need to start with 20 engineers. Maybe depending on the size of your company, you'll need that really quickly. We've tried a couple different types of classifications for security issues over time to help teams figure out like how quickly they have to respond to an issue. Some of those classifications were really complicated and ended up like not making things actually simpler. So we definitely changed that over time. The timing of releases, as I said, like we learned we really shouldn't do that on the weekend. We've also been working with a couple iterations of embedding people on the team from the support organization, which has helped a lot because most pivotal engineers, like their job isn't to respond directly to customers about these issues that they report. So having somebody from support on the team as part of like a balanced team has helped a lot, just so they can see like the best practices of like, this is how you respond to someone who has an issue with your software. Over time, we've developed like a closer partnership with InfoSec as well, just because the issues that people report are sometimes related to pivotal software, and sometimes like I can't get into my workstation, or sometimes they'll report things to security act that are related to physical security or whatever. So we have to collaborate with other parts of the organization. And then the security triage team actually also works on a product that helps us. It's basically a database for vulnerabilities, because we found pretty quickly that if you take kind of a normal pivotal engineer who's trained to pair every day on code and you tell them, here are all these tickets that you have to deal with, we have to kind of give them a break and let them actually develop something too, or else they burn out super quickly. Just the last thing, quick shout out to our leadership teams, our original triage pair, all of our PMs that we've had, and then I actually went through our internal staffing program and found all of the engineers that have ever worked on triage or security enablement over the last couple of years, and it's been a lot of people. And that's it. I think I may be over, but go ahead.
Are we over? So I guess my question is, in the case of the assembly line, empowering the person to either pull the cord or not pull the cord is premised on a certain trust of that person to know what constitutes a defective car versus what constitutes a non-defective one.
Yeah.
So, and this sort of, I think, question kind of connects to your talk from earlier in the week where you said, the ideal would be to have like a security expert on every app team, but of course that's not feasible. So like, how do you validate or like enable the person who specializes in writing code but is not a security expert to be the kind of person who could be trusted to either push the button or not push the button?
Cool, yeah. So the question is, how can we give our developers like enough capability and security so that we can trust them to pull the cord or not pull the cord? That's a really good question. I think part of it is that when Toyota started this, like they didn't care if it was a real defect or not when the people pulled the cord. It was still like, oh, thank you for doing this. We learned something. It doesn't matter if like it was correct to stop the line or not. And it also is like a signal that things are going well if you pull it at the wrong time, right? Because you're still getting a signal. One of the things that we do that helps is that the triage team, every single report, they're going to the person and saying, why do you think this is an issue? Like, what do you think an attacker could do, with this information or this vulnerability? So that person is learning something from that like feedback loop. And because enough people are reporting things and those people don't stay on the same teams forever, they are able to share that like good experience that they had with the triage team so that it's kind of distributed across Pivotal. Like I think the signal there is like, we don't still have people being like, I'm too scared to send this, or we have fewer people saying like, just reporting random security things in other channels. Like they're always coming through security because people realize that like, that's what you do. I think that's all the time we have though. And I have to catch a plane. Thank you.